David Plouffe, what are your thoughts on this, I guess, day before the debate?
Well, I agree very much with Matthew. So I think in many respects, Biden's challenge here, the central challenge, is one of the easier ones we've had in recent memory because it is simply, and this isn't pundits. I mean, voters have said in polls they're not sure he can get through 90 minutes. You know, they'd be surprised if he doesn't make mistakes. So if he can be forceful and strong and not cough up the football, that's going to go a long way to assuaging some of the real concerns voters have. And I would say something really important, Nicole, and I agree with Matthew, this is going to be a huge audience, but it's not everybody that's going to vote. So if you're a presidential campaign, you've got to think about there's going to be people who are watching it directly. That's spin proof. People are going to see it. There's going to be tens of millions of people going to vote in this election, particularly young, who are only going to see this through YouTube, through TikTok, through Instagram. So you have to make sure you have some good moments that you can then put money behind. Some of that will hopefully be organic. So that's right. And then I think the question for Trump is, I don't think he's capable of doing this. But if he were simply to say inflation's too high, the border's out of control, you were better off 4 years ago, here's what I want to do about it, you know, that would be also an easy task. I don't think he's capable of doing that. But listen, this is the most important 90 minutes in Joe Biden's political career. It's one, in my viewpoint, one of the most important 90 minutes in recent American political history. Because if Joe Biden doesn't do what he needs to do Thursday, and I very much think he can, he's a solid debater, I'm not even sure Trump will debate on September 10th. I certainly wouldn't expect he will. So I think this is what you have to seize. And listen, I've helped prepare Joe Biden for vice presidential debates. He works very hard. Even though he's a long and loquacious speaker, he's shown the ability to get things down to 2 or 3 minutes. And he connects with the American people. Even with his challenging poll numbers, Nicole, he still has an edge on who cares about people like you. And I think as he talks about the economy, as he talks about healthcare, as he talks about democracy, if he does it through that very authentic lens, I think it can be a very good night for him.
Liz, I want to put you on the spot. I think you're three of the smartest operatives that have ever done this job, and you still are doing this job. You're helping the Biden campaign, and we want to hear about that. But I disagree. I think if you're talking about healthcare and jobs, I think you're having a different conversation. People that turn it on want to see if you're strong enough. That's it. And I spent the weekend talking to folks about campaigns. People will go with the crazy guy over the guy that they don't think is strong enough. And Trump, you know, Trump's talking about getting a shot. Ass is the word that was bleeped. We're done bleeping Donald Trump. He accused Joe Biden of sleeping until he gets a shot in the ass. There's always a projection. I mean, it makes me wonder what they're shooting into Trump's ass. I mean, this is not a high-minded debate that meets the sort of intelligence of the kind of people that usually talk about debates. And I wonder how you deal with that. I mean, there should be wrestling people in the spin room. Trump is not going to be out there as a serious human being, let alone a serious candidate for the presidency.
Right. No, I agree with a lot of what you just said. And let's look at Donald Trump. This is not new, him accusing his opponent of doing drugs, using performance-enhancing drugs, getting a shot in the ass before a debate. He did this with Joe Biden in 2020. He did this with Hillary Clinton in 2016. It is a bizarre tick of his. You know, we know that he's a creature of habit. He has a lot of nostalgia for the past. He was a big boxing fan, you know, back in the day. And so I think some of this might be hearkening back to like the smack talk that you had before, you know, big boxing matches. But putting that aside, I think to your point about what's more important, the substance or the style, I agree that style here is going to be really important for both of them. And, you know, for Joe Biden, he's just got to really meet the low bar of showing up and, you know, being present, somewhat vigorous. With Donald Trump, it's a little bit different, right? My concern as a Democrat is that a lot of people are going to expect the unhinged Donald Trump, the Donald Trump that you spoke about in your intro, to show up. And there's a lot of indications that it might not be the Donald Trump who shows up. This election cycle, he has a much more professional, disciplined team than he's had in the past. I mean, look, it's all relative. And we saw that when he's had big moments before, like the night he won the Iowa caucuses, a very restrained and, dare I say, boring Donald Trump showed up. So there is a chance that Donald Trump shows up on the debate stage on Thursday. And Joe Biden and Democrats need to be prepared for that and be prepared for someone who's not going to show up and be a raving lunatic. But what you can do, however, is get him on the record, on the things that we know will be played in those little sound bites that Pluff was talking about, right? Because most people will not be watching the debate in full. They'll be seeing the clips on local media. They'll be seeing clips on TikTok. They'll be seeing clips that their friends are sharing on social media. And we know what the key issues are going to be, right? It's going to be getting Donald Trump, trapping him into saying some of the worst stuff he said about abortion rights, trapping him into saying some of the worst things he said about the election in January 6th, getting him to admit to the fact that he was the reason why Republicans tanked our best chance at bipartisan immigration reform in decades. And, yes, that is an issue of substance. And I do think it is really important that while we do focus on style, we do have to understand that Joe Biden has vulnerabilities with the electorate on two key issues. One is the economy. And to what David said, he's got to show he's going to be a fighter for the middle class. He's on their side. But on the issue of immigration, that is one of the key issues for voters in these swing states. And I really do think, as someone who advised Tom Suozzi in New York 3, that this is a golden opportunity for Joe Biden to do something he hasn't yet, which is to put Donald Trump on the defensive on this issue and show that he is the person who is stoking chaos at the border, not Joe Biden. And that would be a really good way to flip the script on an issue where Democrats are really on their back heel right now.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, let me show some of what Donald Trump. I mean, I like that you're talking about who shows up. Here's some of the Donald Trumps who have shown up in the past. Let me play this for all of you.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that.
My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund. Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit
no, you're
that the Russians.
I mean, Matt Dowd, I'm just thinking about debate prep, and I'm thinking about the moments that you can't plan for. And the State of the Union speech is the right parallel that Hillary Clinton draws, but and she's right to point out his response to the hecklers. But it's also, to what Liz is saying, the response in the room to immigration, when the Republican senator is sort of nodding and improving as a fact check on Joe Biden's side against the Republicans in the room. I mean, I guess if there's one fact to get through, it's that Joe Biden was going to do a very Republican bill on immigration, and Donald Trump killed it. But the rest of it feels like an ability to stand up to a bully. How do you sort of prep for that in the momentness?
Well, it's very hard to prep for the in-the-momentness. You have to actually lean on the natural abilities of the candidate, and I think Joe Biden has shown that he has some natural abilities to go off the cuff and do that in a way. Most of the time, I'm not saying all the time. There's been some instances where he hasn't done it well, but most of the time he does it well. I don't think you need to choose this. I don't think it's a false choice to say you either need to choose style or substance. I think you show strength and show what competence by the substance you talk about, including immigration. And I agree 1,000% with Liz on this. I'm surprised that the Democrats and Joe Biden hasn't used immigration as proactive in this. Not that they're going to win the issue on this, but actually put Donald Trump and the Republicans on the defensive in the course of this debate. But I think you show you're strong by having command of the substance and show what the American people. But I think fundamentally, when all is said and done, I think what Joe Biden needs to really relate is, and he needs to give voters a permission structure that says you may, and not say this directly, but you may have questions about my age, or you may not like me, but every day I'm working on my administration is working on behalf of you every single day. And by the way, I'm doing more for Trump voters than Donald Trump has ever done for Trump voters in the course of this. And Donald Trump over there is not doing anything any day of the week that helps anybody but himself. And I think by talking substance and showing his strength, he has to be able to say, you may not like me, but I'm working every day on your behalf. And you may not always agree with me, but that's my North Star. Donald Trump's North Star is himself.
Why not say something about the age? Why not hang a lantern around your own problems, Matt Dowd, and just knock it out as an issue? A cell phone.
Well, I think he could do it. I mean, if I spent 15 minutes, I could come up with kind of a funny line on this in the course of this. I've always thought about the choice here, and I'm not saying you say this, but I always thought about the choice here is the choice. If you have to, Nicole, if you want somebody to house sit your home and you have two elderly gentlemen that you have a choice between, and you have to pick the two elderly gentlemen that to house sit your home. One, this guy named Joe Biden, who is elderly, he may forget to turn the porch light off, and he may take a nap or two while you're away from the house. That's Joe Biden, but he's going to water your plants and feed your dog. Donald Trump, the house sitter, will kill your plants, sell your furniture, and kill your dog, and probably let the burglars in so he can split the profits on whatever the burglar is going to get. That's the choice between two older people that are going to sit your house. Somebody forgets the porch light, and somebody's going to sell your furniture and kill your dog.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.